Today we attack the backs. Last week we gave you our top five fantasy MLR forwards heading into the upcoming year. On this week's episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show, we give you the best backs that will be scoring tries and looking good while doing it, while contributing to your fantasy MLR teams. The Fantasy Ruckers Show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode 138 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you so much for Fantasy Ruckers League members, our community members, and everyone else tagging along on our journey of making fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. With you each and every single week, Matt Yee. I'm Ryan Yee. Matty, can you feel it? Can you feel it?
I can feel it coming.
The fantasy MLR
I can feel it
season,
coming
the
in
Major
the air
League
tonight.
Rugby season is upon us very, very soon. We are a little over, 3 weeks away, I think, to the start of a brand new year.
And
It's getting exciting, man.
you know how we're getting pretty close because Rugby Carolina decided to release a roster.
That is right, and that is going to be a big theme on this episode where we finally get to dive into some of these players and something that we're going to talk about on this show. But yeah, I got a jam-packed one for all of you listening, watching on our YouTube channel, listening wherever you get podcasts. Of course, some news to catch up on, including that delayed roster release from Anthem Rugby Carolina, which Maddie and I will give our reactions to. Some other latest signings. We also got a little bit of preseason action starting at the time of the recording of this podcast. It has not happened yet, but by the time this is released, it would have happened. So technically, we're in the future right now, Maddie, and we got to do our best in trying to predicting the future when it comes to this game. But I mean, we're excited for what is a historic game. And if you don't know about it, it is RFC LA versus Fiji and Drua, the first matchup between an MLR team and a Super Rugby team in the history of, I guess, these two competitions, especially obviously Major League Rugby, which is interesting enough. So we're going to get into all that. And of course, we continue the preparation that is getting you ready for the Fantasy MLR season. Last week, we broke down our top 5 rankings when it came to the best forwards heading into the 2025 Fantasy MLR year. Your best Fantasy MLR props, your best Fantasy MLR second rowers, your best Fantasy MLR back rowers, and then the overall forwards there. If you missed that, check out episode 137. We broke it all down, have it nicely organized for you in chapters. Got some pretty cool graphics in there too for you to break it all down and jump throughout that episode. Today, though, I said it at the top of the show, Maddie, it's our bread and butter. We attack the backs today. That's what we think, at least, where we go through our top 5 fantasy MLR backs at each positions. That includes scrum halves, fly halves, centers, back threes, and also the overarching backs in all of fantasy MLR, plus give you our overall top 5 rankings as well at the tail end now that we've gone through all the positions. So, Maddie, now that we've gone through all that, does that get you even more excited for the fantasy MLR?
Yes, you're pretty pumped up. I mean, I've already been pumped up. I've been doing lots of research. I've been doing lots of scouting.
You've been doing
I've been doing film study, lots of film study. You're gonna do some more film study later.
A little bit of a little step up from your sticky notes that you originally started with.
We got film study now.
You got film study now. All right, you're making improvements there in the shop,
sir.
in the fantasy MLR shop.
Sir.
That is Matt Yee's fantasy MLR office. For those of you that have been tagging along, of course, you noticed that we're missing our third host, Devin Vanderpool, our in-house Major League Rugby rookie. I don't know if we can call him a rookie anymore. He's a vet now. He's graduated the Fantasy Ruckers School. We also, though, need to explain it because we do have a bunch of new subscribers, followers, and people in our Discord that we got to give a shout out to and that are going to be trying out Fantasy MLR for the first time this upcoming year, who may not know the backstory that is the Fantasy Ruckers. Well, we started this thing with a mission, again, of making fantasy rugby a reality in the MLR. And we brought, Maddie, on this journey with myself, who has a background in rugby, having played in our heydays. Definitely not in that prime shape anymore to be playing at that top tier. Matt's gone as high as Canada U20. Pretty cool
No,
stuff. I played for Western University and the good old OUA. And then Vandy, though, is our in-house rookie, at least at the time, who has a whole lot of fantasy experience. But when it came to rugby, not so much. But hey, through Fantasy MLR, he has learned a ton over the 4 years we've been doing this. And he's I would say almost an expert now. So he's had some computer issues last episode that we had
now
some
he's got
some
immune
fun
system
with.
issues.
Now he has immune system issues. We have not yet found the culprit on who drenched his
I think it was him.
laptop.
Self sabotage.
Self-sabotage. I think he may have
Scared of the
had
rankings.
maybe one too many adult beverages, and maybe I forgot, what he was doing. But now, yeah, he's caught a little bit of a cold that time of the year, I guess. But either way, I guess he's got a case of the scared of releasing some rankings. But he should be back in next week's episode, which would be an exciting one. Stick around to the tail end of that to see what we have in store for next week. But we still have this week to get through, Maddie. And why don't we hop right into it and start talking a little bit about the latest
Let's do
news?
it.
All right. Before we do though, follow us at the
Yes, sir.
Fantasy Ruckers. Shout out to all the new people
Yes,
out
sir.
there. But also keep spreading the message. We want to get this fantasy rugby thing growing in Major League Rugby, and it helps us out when you like, subscribe, comment, interact with us. It's really exciting
We
stuff.
love
Again, we've had a lot of
engagement.
new. Uh, we love engagement. A lot of new people have come into our communities. Excited to try Fantasy MLR for the first time. And we're hoping to continue to grow that, which we'll talk a little bit more about in our Commissioner East League update. But first, we got some stuff.
News dump.
Hey, Rod.
And it is the Fantasy
Do you know
Ruckers
what?
news dump.
Great
Yes, Maddie.
segue. You talk about our mission and
hmm
growing us. I saw a little
hmm
thing that we were in an article.
We were in the news.
We were the
We were
news
in the
dump
news.
of a news.
We we were the news dump. That is right. Yes. If you hadn't seen it, pretty cool stuff. Actually, one of our very own Fantasy Ruckers League members, Pierce, who is in a league himself, is also a contributor to the Rugby Rant, who writes articles regularly for the Rugby Rant distribution, and he wrote a little fantasy MLR article, and it was funny. I was going to mention it earlier on, but I guess this is the perfect segment to talk about it, Maddie. That a piece of news was about us. I think this is the first time that we've had the honor to do that in our very own
Yeah.
news dump. But it's funny reading through that article, and if you haven't checked it out, it's posted in our Discord community. We shared it. Check out the Rugby Rant. What a journey we've had. I mean, he was writing down some stuff, and he passed it along to me beforehand just so that I could have a look and see, kind of what if he missed anything when it came to any accuracies when it comes to the journey that is fantasy MLR that we've been on. He got it spot on, I will say, and really how he knew more and remembered more about my own journey than I knew thinking about it. It's pretty crazy, but yeah, I mean, 4 years of this, Maddie, that we've
4
been
years
we've
of
been
this.
trugging along, and it's been a wild
Been a
ride.
wild ride. Look where we are now, though.
Look where we are now. All
All
right,
right.
well,
Shout out to
let's
the
get to the
rugby
more
rant.
serious news. No, yeah, shout out to the Rugby Rant. No one cares about that
Yeah.
piece of
Agreed.
news when it comes about us. But again, we appreciate the growth that is fantasy MLR, and we hope things like that continue growing. So thank you, Pierce. Thank you, Rugby Rant. Appreciate the coverage, and hope that it gets more people interested in trying fantasy Major League Rugby. Let's talk a little bit about some Major League Rugby news, though. I guess the first place to start, Maddie, we might as well. We've been
I don't
waiting
even want
long
to give
enough.
him any
Um,
attention, Ryan.
no, you want to
No,
just skip
I mean
over it?
we
We've
have to
been kind of
announce it, but I'm
harping
not
on it.
gonna. I'm not gonna give it too much. Not gonna give them their flowers for just doing the bare minimum.
That's true. I mind you, a delayed bare minimum on top of that as well. But either way, yes, we mentioned it and alluded to it at the top of the episode. Anthem Rugby Carolina has finally announced the roster that they will be heading into the
Yeah.
2025 year with. It was partly the reason why this episode is once again delayed. Usually we come out on
Come on
Tuesdays
now.
or earlier in the front half of the week. We were waiting for the announcement on Tuesday. We thought it was going to come out earlier. They ended up releasing it later in the evening, which pushed
That's my
our
bedtime.
schedule later past the bedtime. And we had to take some time digesting it all down. But hey, here we are, and it is out.
Uh,
I'm sure everyone out there has seen the roster,
yeah.
so I don't think we need to go through each and every
No,
one, but
I'll
kind of
just
what
say,
were the
yeah,
biggest things for
couple
you,
big
Maddie?
things. One, thanks for giving us the positions of the players. That's really helpful. I will just assume the position of each player, as you know, a fan maybe of the MLR or a rugby fan or somebody who wants to support the MLR. So thank you for that anthem. That was very kind of you to do that. The other thing, the big thing for me, and I think was obviously we got confirmation of Sam Gala, Mitch Wilson.
Hmm.
We got confirmation that Clive and Lobster is coming back. We see McKean Ali Khan. I think their team looks a lot better now. I think that is going to be reflected as we get into our rankings, Rye. And
Hmm.
also, I think one of the big missing and one of the guys from last year is Connor McManus. You look at that ninth position. We will talk about that more in our rankings. But yeah, it was interesting, but definitely a much better roster. I think they're going to be competing this year, and I definitely think that they're going to get a win this year with that roster.
Yeah, notable additions for me. Obviously, the addition of Sam Gala is a big one there. Obviously, he's a guy that fits right into kind of what the Anthem are looking to do, right? A
Yep.
developmental side for USA Rugby leading up to the World Cup. Sam Gala is obviously leading the charge in this next generation of young Americans that are coming through. So, not surprised again, it's something we expected coming through for quite some time, on top of, like you mentioned, Mitch Wilson. But then you add some other notable kind of Americans in there as well. Connor
Yep.
Mooneyham, a
True.
guy that is quite familiar in the MLR, obviously a first overall pick, was with Dallas. And then went to Seattle, and then now is with the Anthem here. Again, you mentioned Mitch Wilson, Matt. Eric
Yeah.
Storty, number one overall pick here in
Gaffa's
2024.
still there.
Here, Goff is
Oh,
still there. The big one, though,
yeah.
for me that's missing is Tarangatira
Yes.
Waitokia. I mean, from a fantasy MLR sense, he was massive, right? If I recall correctly,
I mean, he was like
the
second ranked.
second highest point, exactly, second highest point score with 218.6 fantasy points, right after the incredible season that Michael Manson had. He was a guy that I noticed was not on the list, but again, I think you lose to Rangatir Waitokia, but you add guys like Sam Gala, Mitch Wilson, Connor Mooneyham. I think overall net gain here for Anthem Rugby Carolina, and I agree with you. I think they'll be getting their first win here in
Yep, and they don't
2025.
have David Still coming back, which I saw, which was
Mhm.
surprising. But hey, I guess he was kind of basically not on the team with how many yellow cards he got last year.
Absolutely. All right. We'll dive deeper into the position by position stuff as we go through our rankings. I will say we talked about Jake Turnbull last week when it came to the forwards. We talked about Sam Gala last week when it came to the second row ranking. So again, check out that episode if you want to get a deeper dive in terms of, anyone that you may see on this list that may have a fantasy impact. Guys that I would probably say is on the cusp here, maybe didn't make our top five. I don't think any of this changes our top five in any shape or form, really. But guys, McKean Alican is a guy that
Mm,
was fantasy relevant. Albert
mm.
O'Shaughnessy was fantasy relevant. So, guys to keep an eye on here moving forward. All right, moving on to some other teams, though, Maddie. Other teams are continuing to make announcements when it comes to signings. Teams that I guess now are lagging behind Anthem Rugby Carolina when it comes to announcing finalized rosters. But the Utah Warriors have probably announced the biggest player that we all knew was coming back. I think we all assumed, but it's nice to have that confirmation, and that is
Yeah,
Joel Hodgson is returning to the Utah Warriors. And again, a guy that we figured would be coming back, but now it is confirmed by the team itself. Joel Hodgson, one of the best fantasy fly halves in all of Major League Rugby last season, and continues to be seasons before that as well. I expect him to be quite high this season, which will be reflected in our rankings coming up. But good to see Joel Hodgson return in the red and black.
yeah, not much else to say there. It's good to see the guy back.
Um, Yeah, absolutely. And I guess then moving over, another signing that we have to mention. There's a guy by the name of Rufus McLean, U.S. born, played for the American Raptors in 2024, has played with the Glasgow Warriors, had a contract canceled with them because of underlying circumstances, off the field stuff. That is definitely not great, but he looks to turn it around with the Houston
Yeah.
SaberCats, who is capped with
Yeah, I won't be
Scotland.
getting the ball much with Houston anyways.
Yeah, yeah, with the way that they play the ball. All right, let's talk a little bit about preseason rugby, Maddie, because we do have a game that is happening tonight at the time of the recording of this podcast. The game will be wrapped up by the time this podcast is released, but it is probably the biggest preseason match, if not one of the biggest matches, period, in all of
Yeah,
Major League Rugby history, and that is RFC LA, which I have confirmed they are sticking with RFC LA apparently because all their graphics continue to
whatever.
say RFC LA and
They're
not
just
Rugby LA, so I'm gonna stick with that. But well, it's funny they say RFC LA in their Twitter post, right? But then in the graphic it says RFC
yeah.
LA, and then
Well,
in the
they
post
didn't
itself
have
it
time
says
to
Rugby
create
LA.
new graphics. You know, they're
So
reusing,
I guess not.
recycling,
But
but we do.
either way, Rugby Football Club Los
Sure.
Angeles is playing Fiji and Drua tonight here. Again, the results will be out by the time we release this podcast. But either way, let's break it down, Maddie. And obviously, I think we know what the result will be. But this is the first like official lineup that we're seeing from a MLR squad, and any kind of implications or any reactions that you're seeing with that. There are a couple notables here that is
Yeah, I
interesting.
mean, I'm not going to speak at all to the Fijian Drua squad. I mean, they're an absolute squad and they compete at the Super Rugby level. Whether they're going to play all their top guys, I'm sure they'll have some in there. We'll see. But in regards to the LA team, I think it's clear that they are looking not necessarily at putting out their best lineup to start. You know, they have a lot of key notable guys, but it seems like clear, like as usual, preseason rugby, they're probably going to put in maybe a first half team and a second half team, kind of have some rolling subs. Usually that's how it's done in preseason rugby. But yeah, I'm really looking forward. Some things I'm really looking forward to see is the connection between Gonzalo Bachanu and Christian Leolifano. I'm just honestly excited to see Leolifano
Hmm.
just playing for an American MLR side. Um,
Hmm.
I'm really looking forward to see how Rory Van Voot looks. I want to see what that looks like, as well as Christian Dyer, see what form he's in. And then you're going to look, I'm going to be watching a lot of what is the lineup between Ryan. You talked about in our last episode of like, what do we do at the hooker position? Who's going to be starting? Ben Sugars versus Ben Strang. Like this is where I think as a fantasy manager and as a future fantasy manager, us and anybody else participating, you got to look here at who's shining and who's shining in these preseason games, how they're being played. Lower game time honestly might mean a good thing. And if they do really well in that game time, I think it's important to look out for that. And yeah, like I'm not too worried about some of the guys coming off the bench. I'm also one guy that I got to say is Vogan Isaacs coming in. Where does he
Hmm.
slot in?
Hmm.
Does he slot in at 15? What does that look like? Really looking forward to that. Um, but yeah, this is going to be a really good one, I think, and it's going to be a really great tell for us fantasy managers, and also just it's just going to be a great event overall. The first time an MLR team is facing a Super Rugby side.
Yeah, no, I completely agree there. Yeah, you nailed it on the head with a lot of those points. Some of the things that I'll add to that, I guess that point of this is not necessarily their number one lineup, right? Like you'd expect come the start of the MLR season, Semi Kunatani will obviously be starting. Billy Meeks will obviously be
Yeah,
starting in that that first 15. So I'm split on whether how I feel because obviously I'm on the record saying that I think the LA team's hooker is going to be very, very fantasy relevant. It's just you're going to have to make the decision between
yeah,
Ben Sugars and Ben Strang, and the fact that Sugars is starting. I don't know how to feel about that, but we'll see. Again, I think to
yeah.
your point, Maddie, it's just watching the match, seeing who plays and how they
I was
play,
gonna
and going
look a
from there. I
lot
think the
into it,
biggest
but then you realize that like it's clearly that they're
it's a
playing a
split team.
balanced lineup here. And it's going to be
Yeah,
rolling.
yeah,
Like you're going to see different combinations here. It's a scrimmage. They might even do three halves, like three different sections. It's possible.
water breaks.
Whatever. Screw water breaks. They don't do that in Super Rugby. But Like that's what Super Rugby usually does in preseason. They'll have, I think they usually do three halves, and usually they put out three different combinations of teams out there. So
Three
or
halves? That doesn't make
whatever,
sense.
20-minute, whatever,
Three.
25, whatever it is. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be awesome to watch. One thing I will say to fantasy managers, if you're going to be watching this game, and it'll obviously be done when this comes out, but it'll be interesting to understand, the play style, because I think with a lot of new players, you have the opportunity to implement new play styles and implement and build upon their last year's play style. And if they continue with the
Mhm.
play style that they had last year, it can really tell kind of where the points are going to come from for this team.
Last thing I'll add, Jason Dom, the fact that he's starting at hooker is
You mean
making me
lock?
concerned because I mean, yeah, Locke, sorry, has me a little bit concerned because I omitted him from my
Sucks to
top
suck.
five rankings because of his appearances last year was a majority at that back row position. He was kind of bouncing back and forth from that fantasy MLR eligibility when it came to being lock eligible versus back row eligible. Um, yeah,
No
I
take
might be biting my
backies.
tongue with that one. No take backies. But either way, it should be a fun match. I'm going to be tuning in. Maddie, I'm sure you'll be tuning
Pretty
in.
late.
And we'll see how it goes. And again, I don't think it necessarily and this goes for any of the preseason matches coming up. It's not so much about the result that comes out of it. Really fine tune and look at these guys and how they're playing and understand the play styles and what they're trying to do. And I think that is going to dictate
And
kind of how fantasy relevant these guys are
just
going to
by the
be.
way, this is going to be the best quality preseason game you will see. Everything else is going to be filmed on a potato. I promise you.
Uh, that's probably true. That is probably true. Speaking of other preseason games, there have been some that have been announced officially so far. Houston is going to take on the NOLA Gold on February
Potato.
1st. They will take on Chicago as well on February 8th. And then this one will for sure be on a potato, Maddie. Seattle will be taking on the Seattle Rugby Club on February 7th.
Jeez.
So a few of these to look out. I don't even know if that one will be streamed. I guess we'll have to see.
I think
But
Seattle
either
will
way,
stream it.
a
That
handful of
Houston game is
preseason
definitely
games
going to be
for
filmed
people
on
to
a
watch out
potato,
there.
though. Last year,
Yeah,
I
well,
swear you
we'll
couldn't
see.
even read the scoreboard.
Well, we shall see. So exciting stuff because MLR, it really starting to feel with it right around the corner. It kicks off with a historic match tonight here between RFCLA and Fiji and Drua. All right, you ready to get to some fantasy MLR league update stuff,
Oh,
Matt?
no. But yeah, let's do it. So I'll go to the rankings. We got this dumb commissioner having to talk in our ears.
No, this this one's not dumb, Maddie, because it's important. We have a call
True.
to action. We only have a call to action once a
Well,
year, and we need the
yeah, I
people
think
to
you
hear. We need the
abused it a little bit.
trumpets going. That's true. That's true. Either way. First off, let me just say, as kind of the organizing
I don't know. Just say Supreme Commissioner.
body, I'm trying to. I thought
I
you
don't
didn't like
like it,
that.
but that's the best way to describe it. So you just
All
say it.
right. All right. Well, I am the Supreme
Jeez.
Commissioner. Bow
Well,
down
see,
to
I didn't
me.
say to say that.
I am
That's
the
not what I
master.
said.
Is the so it's been fun. Obviously, this journey of 4 years of making fantasy MLR reality. We're heading into our second season of making having it open to the public and people outside of kind of the rugby community circle. Really notable contributors being a part of our main league. We've opened that up and expanded that to people who just want to try it out. I've had a great response here to start off 2025. So shout out to all the
That
people out there that have signed up and are excited to take part in the league. I've been going through all of the registrations and all the forms that have come in through our Google Forms,
how
have
many
been
we at, Rye?
organizing and slowly we are at a five leagues here,
Whoa.
which is pretty good stuff. On top of our main fantasy Ruckers leagues, I expect that to continue to grow. There is a good mix of both paid leagues. That's a new
Hey.
thing this year, where you get to pay $10 and see if you can win some money at the end of the year. Nice to put a little bit of skin on the line.
Oh,
And then we also do have our free leagues as well, so that you can just dabble in it and see whether or not fantasy MLR is something that you enjoy. So it's been fun seeing all the feedback we've been getting. We are continuing to, again, finalize those leagues, get things sorted. That should be being finalized here within the next handful of days or so. So this is your last chance. And this is the final call to action for anyone out there who is still interested in partaking in Fantasy MLR. Head to the link down below in the description where we have a Google form for you to sign up. We will be closing that very, very shortly because drafts are going to be starting February
Whoa.
3rd. So, in less than 2 weeks away, drafts will begin to get organized by the minion commissioners.
Okay,
And
Ryan.
all that communication will be going through those commissioners that in the leagues that you're assigned to once those are finalized. So, get in that registration, fill out the information required, get into those leagues. It's going to be a lot of fun. People had a blast last year. We've had a blast over the course of this journey. And yeah, partake in Fantasy MLR 2025. Again, description link is down below to get into that. Yeah, been a lot of fun.
Yeah. I mean, hey, we've already beat, I guess, the number of leagues we had last year. So
Hmm.
let's keep it going. Let's get another league in here and let's spread the love, spread the MLR love.
There we go. All right. Well, if you are officially signed up for a fantasy MLR season this upcoming year, you're going to want to listen to some
Or
rankings.
not
Again,
listen.
we went through the best forwards last week. It's time to attack the backs.
Preseason warm-up.
How long have you been thinking about that one? Attack the
All day.
backs.
All
Yeah,
day.
that's what I thought.
I went with back attack.
I don't
I was
think we
like
want that.
on
We
my
don't want no
drive home
back
from work.
attacks.
I was literally going through my head things that rhymed with back. I
Yeah,
was
no,
like
no,
back
no attacks.
sack,
Well, we definitely don't want
back
that. I
backs,
don't want any attacks from the back.
tack. Yeah. So we landed on attack the backs. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah. Well,
Pretty good. Let's get
yeah.
into it, Maddie. You already talked about it.
Yeah.
We again broke down the top five forwards last week. It's time to go into our bread and butter. Again, Maddie and myself are former nines. This is kind of what we know
And we still
best.
get it wrong.
Um, and we still yeah, if you look at last year, not so hot, but we have more information on our hands
Uh,
here. We've gone through another season of Fantasy
uh,
MLR. I can only imagine
yeah. Look,
improvements we get closer. You told me off the
we
record,
are a
Maddie.
gritty bunch.
You are locked in
We
on
are
some
a
of these
gritty
rankings.
bunch, and we learn. We learn from our mistakes. You know, we are
Determined.
determined. We're
We learn. I
resilient.
don't know if we
We're
learn from our mistakes,
resilient,
but we
and we
learn.
persevere. Right. When I was going through this, I think again, we talked about the forwards last week as we were going through that, and it's a very much a mix of opportunity and just player skill and what we think that they're going to have. I look at opportunity. I think when we look at the nine position coming up that we're going to talk about, you look a lot at opportunity. But with the backs here,
Hmm.
I feel like it's a lot more of like, man, is the team going to be good? Is the team going to be good? Are they going to have
Hmm.
opportunities to score point? What is the play style of said team? We look at like a
Hmm.
team like Houston, and I know that, hey, they automatically get -2 ranks because the backs on that team outside of Davy Kutzer basically don't get the ball. Right. And like, you know, we'll get into some of those, but yeah, this was a
It
little
did.
bit
You're
of a
right.
different
You're
outlook
right.
just because these guys are going to be meters gain and point reliant, and meters gain and point reliance requires you to have a good team and a good offense.
That's right. You can almost look at on the flip side. Not to say that forwards are necessarily thrive on this, but there's a way for forwards to get a lot of points
Yeah.
even if they don't have the ball in their hands, right? The center position kind of borderlines that, but as we get into those positions, I think you'll understand that you're going to have a leg up because not only are some of these guys getting tackles, they're also meter
Yep.
eaters and scoring tries. But again, to your point, Maddie, I think there were a good mix of players on our rankings last week in the forward sense that were on a mix of great teams, good teams, and maybe not
Yep.
so great teams. So I think there is a trend when you look at that coming into the backs because what you said, much more reliant on having the ball, much more reliant on a productive offense. And yeah, you're gonna see it here on the players. So you mentioned it, Maddie. We're gonna start down the line, and we're gonna start off with a position that is
Little
very
garden
close to
gnomes.
our hearts. Little little garden gnomes. That is the scrum half position. Is that what they called you, Matt? Little garden gnome
No, they
Yee,
use a
when you're
much
playing.
less PC term. Um,
Okay, we won't go there. We won't
yeah,
go there. Either.
right. I mean, Where do you want to start? I think this is probably the
Let's
position where
start
we
by
had the most non-return guys from last year, maybe.
yes. Yes. I think between this one and maybe even when it comes to the top tier sense, maybe back three, but this one is a big one here. Let's start off here by throwing up the screen to get people's taste buds going when it comes to the backs. The top five from last year. All right. So we have them up there now. We have Connor Tupai, who came in at 115 and a half fantasy points, played with San Diego, obviously a very electric and athletic player who looks to attack the ball, finished off as your number one scrum half. Followed in by Andre Warner, who we can basically call Andre Consistent Warner because literally every single week was a guy that was just going to guarantee you about 8 to 10 points. 108.8 for him. And then you see a little bit of a drop off. Thomas
Cheater.
Inciarte was kind of your
He
cheat
was a
code
cheat code.
last
He was
year.
my Nate Oxburger,
Um,
my Walmart version of
so
Nate Oxburger.
Inciarte is and can play nine, but you're going to see him more at the center position. He had scrum half
He did,
eligibility
and he
last
kept it.
year. He kept it and then played center heading into the playoffs. So this was a guy that obviously did well. You can count on him probably not being in our scrum half rankings here. Spoiler, because of that expectation here. I can tell you as the commissioner who has gone through the database of over 400 players that Inciarte will not have scrum half eligibility heading in to the season. But either way, fair. What's the saying? Fair is
Yeah,
game
nice
is the
try.
game
All
is
right,
fair.
number
And
four. Who's number
yeah.
four and five right from last year?
Kieran McLeay, 93.1 on Utah, and followed by Luke Campbell, the Nola Gold, 85.7. So there's your list there. Connor Tupai, Andre Warner, Thomas Inciarte, Kieran McLeay, Luke Campbell. So that sets the stage for who did well in 2024. But again, to Maddie, your point, there are guys on that list that I think have dropped off a little bit
Uh,
due to circumstances that have happened over this offseason that we'll break down here. But let's start off with number five here, heading into 2025. Maddie, who is your fifth ranked
oh,
scrum
this was a
half?
tough one for me, but I have a little tiny place in my heart for Richard Judd. As a Hurricanes fan myself, whose season, by the way, is starting in a few weeks. As a Hurricanes fan myself, it is really hard to not go with Richard Judd. The way that he played 2 years ago for the San Diego Legion side, um, was electric.
Number one
Yeah,
scrum
it
half
was
in
number one,
fantasy.
but he can't be number one this year. And I couldn't put him at number one this year because of the fact that our number one scrum half from last year is paired up with him in San Diego. Do I think that that's going to necessarily take a hit on his performance? 100%. But I think he's still going to have the opportunity to have those offensive kind of be electric offensively. And then also, if you remember the way that he played, he was also a guy that made a lot of tackles, played in the defensive line, something that you'd love to see, something very Andre Warner esque. So that's why I think he's still going to have the opportunity to put up these points. And you look at the rest of the league, there's not really that many guys until we go kind of higher up through our rankings that have that sole leadership of the nine position for their team.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And yeah, Richard Judd. It's a very, very interesting player to see back in the MLR, especially from a fantasy
Yeah,
sense, because again, to you mentioned it, what he did 2 years ago when he was with San Diego in their run to the Shield, how big of a part of that offense he was in terms of facilitating the speed that he played at, how their offensive play style was so electric, was through the play of Richard Judd, and now you mix in Connor Tupai with that. I completely get it. From a team sense, it might be the best nine room in all of Major League Rugby, right? But from a fantasy sense, again, that production I think is definitely going to be hurt there with Connor Tupai there. Either way, for me at number five, I have a guy you mentioned, Andre
good
Warner
pick.
at the fifth position. Again, I think this was a guy that screamed consistency. He finished off as the scrum half two last year. Again, we mentioned 108.8 fantasy points, but again, it was largely his room, right? Carlo Denician was obviously there, did not get much playing time at all. It really was Andre Warner throughout the whole time of that. You now bring in Juan D. Oliver from the Dallas Jackals, who had a pretty damn good
Very good.
season himself, who finished off as a scrum half six there with 76.8 fantasy points. I'd expect there to be a little bit more of a split, but to your point, Maddie, I think the involvement of Andre Warner being a little bit more involved on the defensive side of things, getting into those tackles. I think the floor for Andre Warner is pretty safe, despite the decreased expectation of playing time. I think Warner is still the starter. I don't think that they're taking that away from him with the addition of Wandy Oliver, by all means. But again, I think that ceiling now has dropped quite a bit here because instead of playing 70 minutes, he might be playing
Yeah, and don't
60.
forget they also have Jay Renton as well. But
Mhm.
yeah, solid pick.
All right, let's go on to number four, Matt. Who do you have at number four? Speaking of a guy
Yeah,
that I
speaking
just
of a
mentioned.
guy, and this one is for me purely opportunity. And you look at the way that the nines for the anthem played last year, Sayosi Nye, Connor McManus, like these guys had the opportunity to get ball in hand and run with the ball. And this Carolina team is only getting better. Carlo Denician, I got here at number four. I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the anthem lineup, Connor McManus is not on there. Originally, when I thought that he would be, I thought, hey, this is kind of a tough one. Not sure if I can have Carlo Denician in here. But Carlo Denician has a sole ownership kind of that nine room. I think he's going to be the outright starter. I think he's going to get majority of the playing time. I think Carl Keane might get some because he's a young guy and they need to develop him. But I think Carlo Denician there is the sole ownership of that nine position. And I think with that opportunity and with the better Carolina team, he's going to get a lot more opportunity to play. And people forget, like 2 years ago, Carlo Denician did well for the Houston Sabercats before the arrival of Andre Warner. He did very
Mhm.
well in 2023. And was definitely and a guy who I had on my fantasy squad at that time. So he definitely has shown that he can succeed in the MLR. And I think now he'll be able to do so with the Carolina anthem.
And the scrum half position is the interesting one, right? Because I'll touch on this here. I think this is where we'll see that bridge between kind of the outlook that you mentioned heading into this segment about, how we evaluated the forwards versus how we evaluate backs. And I think the scrum half position is the interesting one on that
Yep.
opportunity side of things, right? We already know that the scrum half position, and for all of you new fantasy MLR players out there, the scrum half position is a position that has a lower fantasy output. The volume of points that the scrum half position is going to get you is quite low. However, the discrepancy of you having maybe one of those top guys, like a Connor Tupai last year or Richard Judd the year before that, was a huge advantage. But those are far and
Yep.
few in between. So to have a guy that you can rely on that is going to play 70 minutes a game, it's a huge advantage to have that, and just have that opportunity for points to be had. Moving on for my number four, I have a brand new guy here that's entering the lead, and it's very similar to Maddie, your position when it comes to opportunity. Mitch Short. Mitch Short, for the Chicago Hounds, a newcomer, is the guy that I have on my list at number four. Again, this is a guy that obviously you have Michael Baska and Jason
No.
Higgins, right? I think if the Chicago wants to take that step up, they need a step up at that nine position. We had Nick McCarthy last year. He obviously departs the team, and I think Mitch Short hops right into there and replaces kind of that marquee nine position there. I think Chicago is a better team this year. I think the whole thing that was holding them back last year, especially that 5 week stretch in which they had the Billy Meeks experiment, is over. And now that that they're moving on, they have new coaching at the helm. I think it's going to be very, very interesting. Again, if you look at Nick McCarthy's numbers last year and you compare that to what Mitch Short may do this season, because Baska and Higgins were both there last year. I mean, McCarthy was still playing in some games 80 minutes, right? Even surpassing the 70-minute mark as well. And it's a guy that has a lot of pedigree in Mitch Short in terms of the success that he's had in professional rugby, having
Right for the toss.
played overseas. Yeah,
And
exactly. And most recently playing in the D2 French league. I think that he has the tools to be a very successful nine here in
yeah,
the
I mean,
MLR.
this segues to my third ranking because this is exactly where I have Miss Shorten. Why do I have him ranked him at the third? Because I think this guy is going to be a try scoring machine at the nine position. Um, Look, you watch some of the film on this guys, especially with the Wartaws. Mitch Short is one of those nines that is very agile, very quick, and is often running those support lines that we love to see from that nine position. Um, so I can really see him honestly putting up a lot of tries in this nine position. I think three, frankly, is a little bit conservative on my part. And I think four, Ryan, is definitely conservative on your part. I think he's going to end up in the top three. I think he's going to be one of the one of the try scoring nines, back in the days when we saw Richard Judd a couple years ago, a guy we just talked about. I think he has the potential to do that.
All right. Well, let's shift on over to my number three then. John Poland of the New England Free Jacks is who I have at number three. I think this is a guy that's going to go under the radar in
Under the
fantasy
radar.
drafts this year. The reason why I say that is because I think John Poland is coming off of a season where
Injuries.
he had injuries, and obviously high draft capital was spent on him that year. Gets injured in that third round and doesn't see the field again. Season-ending injury. I think there is going to be a whole lot of nearsightedness when it comes to fantasy managers in terms of how good John Poland was in 2023 before he got injured, even in a season where he did not play a full amount of games. In 11 appearances in 2023, he scored 91.2 fantasy points. So you pair that up with being on a team like New England Free Jacks who are looking to run it back. He's the guy there for the most part. I think there was definitely a drop in distribution that you notice when John Poland got injured and they sided with Cam Nordley Kelemeti, and obviously they brought in Oscar Lennon. But I think John Poland brings a next level that knows how to play the Free Jack style, has that chemistry with the squad. I think Poland is going to be a slam dunk pick this year, and I think I shouldn't say sleeper. I don't think he's going to be a sleeper, but I think the draft capital that will be spent on him will be lower than what it should be just because of
Not
what
if you're smart.
happened in recency bias. Not
Yeah,
if you're
fair
smart.
enough. Yeah, I mean, I got John Poland at two. I echo everything that you said about him. He's the clear starter at this New England Free Jack side. I think Oscar Lennon and Cam Norley Kelemeti are young guys that are definitely going to get playing time, definitely going to get their starts. But John Poland is John Poland, and he will continue to be John Poland that we've seen in the best.
All right, let's move on to my number two. This one I don't know if you'll be
Ah,
hyped about because you love this
I
guy
love
so
him, but I
much.
don't know how I feel
Uh,
about this, right?
yeah, so you mentioned him there earlier in your fifth pick. I have him all the way at number two, and that is Richard Judd. I won't touch on all the things that make him great, but I cannot get the taste out of my mouth in terms of just how good he was
Different
2 years ago
situation.
in fantasy MLR. Different situation, I understand that. You have Connor Tupai there, but the thing that gives me hope on this is his involvement. He's almost like, you know, an Andre Warner that can score
Well,
tries,
yeah,
right? And I get it. Connor Tupai is there, and there are going to be games where Tupai might lead the mix, but I just really think that when Richard Judd starts, he's going to put up big numbers, and I think we forget sometimes just how amazing. Like he
yeah.
was
Let
incredible
me tell you a couple things though,
in
Rye. One, not the same San Diego Legion side. I think that's going to
sure.
impact him. And two, he had Danny Christensen as his backup nine when he was playing for that San Diego Legion side. Connor Tupai has is much more quality than Danny Christensen, but I don't blame you, Rye. I think you're right. Like Richard Judd definitely has the potential to be a number two, to be a top 3 9 in this.
Like the way I see it, like even if he plays, let's say 60 minutes, right? Like all it takes is for him because there were games where he had like 15 tackles,
Yeah.
right? If I remember, like it was ridiculous. So like you add that plus his try scoring
Yeah.
ability. I mean, even in 60 minutes played,
We'll
it's good. Again,
see.
I think this is a play.
It'll be interesting though, right? Like San Diego is going to be an interesting play. They got a pretty new team, a lot of veteran guys leaving.
Mhm.
Their coach leaves to go to NOLA. So we'll see how that impacts. But Richard Judd is Richard Judd, and quality is quality, and you can't really change that. So I don't agree, but I got no concerns with you putting him up that high.
All right, let's shift on to number one, Maddie, and we're in agreement on how we think the number nine
Gonzalo.
is going to be. Gonzalo Bertranu, the Argentinian
Mm.
nine, is our number one, playing for RFC LA. We're going to see him in this game against, or in this match against Fiji and Drua. I mean, I think if I had the most confidence in any of these picks outside of John Poland, maybe like Gonzalo Bertranu is for me like
Yeah,
I'm very
yeah,
confident
he's
in
in a
this
great
one.
situation. I mean, he's the outright starter. He's got the opportunity. He's got the team. And he's a class player. I mean, you watch him play in the most recent World Cup for Argentina. He can do a little bit of everything. He is also a great support line runner, great with ball in hand. Um, yeah, it's hard not to put him at the top here with the team that he has around him, with the type of play that RFCLA usually has played historically in the past, historically meaning last year, and the type of player that he is. So, yeah, hard not to put him number one here. I would say Ryan, I agree him, and then for me, Mitch Short, I feel very confident in.
Okay. Let's talk about some honorable mentions here. We
Oh, I
talked
left
about
Andre Warner out of
Connor
my
too.
top five, so
You did, which is interesting. Or how scared are you that he your
I don't like.
biggest guy that you think that will
No,
break the top five that you have on not have on your
maybe,
list?
yeah. I think he's going to be a 5 or 6 guy. Like I think he's going to be right up there. I just think that they've gotten added better depth than last year.
And I think that's again that we've mentioned it on this show before. Like I think that's the direction where this league is going. Where like I think the league understands that the season is a grind, and on top of the addition of midweek games, and on top of the addition of all the travel and things that they already have had to deal with in the past, like I think having a deep
Yep.
team is going to go a long way from a successful team standpoint. From a fantasy standpoint, it sucks for a lack of better terms, but again, just strategy that we have to
Yep.
play out here. And again, I do agree that Andre Warner's value is definitely hit here. But again, couldn't leave him out of my top five there. A couple guys that I had off my list that I want to mention. Obviously, we talked about Connor Tupai. I see a world where, you know, Richard Judd gets hurt or something like that, or Connor Tupai starts. Like I think that San Diego nine position is interchangeable. I just don't know what to expect, kind of what you mentioned. But Richard Judd, having done what he did in 2023, again has me at two and Tupai off the list, despite finishing as number one. We mentioned that Juan D. Oliver, kind of same situation with Andre Warner. He was so good in Dallas. It's so weird to me seeing him in that back nine position. I'm just curious to see kind of his involvement. Two guys that we haven't mentioned, Logan Crowley. Won't touch a lot on him. Again, he's a new signing for Utah. This is all about opportunity. Like there's no one else in Utah. I don't think Utah is going to be that great of a team. So I don't know how much Logan is going to get hurt by that. But again, he's going to be on the field. And I think he's going to see a lot of opportunity, has the chances to score points. We'll see that. And then the other one is you can't not talk about this nine position without JP Smith. I mean, he has been a nine in the past that has been very fantasy relevant. You could argue a lot of that has been because of how much he's been on the field. Like I think what last year he played like all 16 matches, right? In the season. You have the addition of Brock Gallagher, who we've had on the show, was a fantastic interview, friend of the show. Obviously down season last year, Scrum half nine, but there is a world where Seattle starts rolling again and JP Smith starts doing JP Smith things that we've seen him do in the past. I'm not worried. Like, I don't think he's going to be a top five guy, but it wouldn't surprise me by the end of the season if he was a top five
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. I mean, Brock Gallagher kind of said that he's being brought in to alleviate some of the immense playing time that JP Smith had to play. So ultimately, you kind of think, all right, he's probably going to play a bit less, not play as many 80-minute games. And that just is what it is. And that's going to take an impact in fantasy wise. Only couple things I have to say. Logan Crowley, Zion going does exist. Utah, for whatever reason, starts Zion going, even though the other nine's better. And that happens.
Yeah, Kieran McLeese situation. But hey, Kieran McLeese still finished at the fourth best scrum half last
Yeah,
year.
true.
So
And then the last one I got is just Ruben DeHaas. He comes from the Cheetahs. He's an American. He's American eligible. Plays for the Eagles. He's not going to give up kind of opportunity with the Cheetahs. If he wasn't going to get playing time here, I think he will get playing time. So he's a guy to watch.
that nine room in NOLA scares me. Like I just don't know what's gonna happen
Jeez.
over there. Which is, I mean, again, Ruben
Scared
DeHaas
about
could easily
yeah.
be on.
Scared about
Damian Stevens, Luke Campbell, Ruben DeHaas. They're all
whatever.
we've all seen them start,
Damian Stevens
right?
stinks. Anyways,
Yeah, well. All right, let's move on to the fly half position, Maddie here. This one was an interesting one. Obviously, these some of these guys are your point getters, right? Kickers, get them points, right? And maybe to an extent, like you don't need to necessarily be on a team that wins a lot of games to be successful here. We'll mention a guy here that was in our just outside of our top five, but Cliven Laubser was an example of that last year in the handful of games he played. Obviously on a team that never won a match in 2024, but still was fantastic from a fly half standpoint. But let's throw up the top five guys from last year. We got Jason Putros, the guy that's been doing it since I feel like the beginning of this league, ever since he's joined. 210.6 fantasy points for New England, was 10 points higher than a guy that is even more stable every single year. Joel Hodgson at 199.5 points, finishing off as the fly half two for Utah. And then we had Davy Kutzer, which was an interesting one because obviously we saw him start at fly half in the beginning of the year. AJ Alatimu in the mix. He starts to move back to that fullback position. Sometimes he's kicking when he's fullback. Sometimes he's not kicking when when AJ Alatimu's in. So there's a combination of that. But anyways, he finishes off as the fly half three eligible, 171.2 fantasy points. And I will say heading into this year, he will have fly half back three eligibility to start the season. So we'll see where that goes. Jason Robertson finished off as your fly half four with 168.7 points for DC. And then Mac Mason, a guy that we're not going to see this year, was left off of the Seattle list. We're not quite sure where Mac Mason has gone, but obviously not returning with the team. 156.1 fantasy points as the fifth best fly half. So, Maddie, why don't you kick it off? Why don't we start off here with
Yeah,
number
number
five?
five. Tough not to go this way. Jason Robertson, number five for OGDC. I mean, the guy was just, you talk about consistency. Jason Robertson was fairly consistent. I mean, never really had a huge game. But even on a pretty average OGDC, he was he started every game except two of them. And I can see that continuing. He's going to continue to be a weapon off the tee. And out of for our tens, I think that's something that really adds. You love to see those conversions or penalty kicks, because that just helps add to some of that floor and add to that stability. So yeah, Jason Robertson there at number five.
Yeah, I think stability is kind of the key word there. Just he's the guy there, right? He's gonna be kicking those points for DC. For me at number five, I have Santiago
Wow.
Videla. Miami Sharks player, 154.4 fantasy points last year. He had the highest points per game, the third
Wow.
highest points per game out of all fly halves last season. Finishes off as fly half six, and that is even having to compete with Philippe Echeverry to start the season. So he didn't start at the fly half position until round eight. And then since then, he scored basically double digit points in every single match that he played in, except for three. Two of those were just 1 point shy of 10 points. So I think Philippe Echeverry, or not Philippe, I think Santiago
Jeez.
Videla is a great, great, great pick. Philippe Echeverry is not on the Miami Sharks team this season. So again, I think Santiago Videla, he obviously has played the fullback, but I imagine he's going to be coming in as their starting 10. Right now it's between Shane O'Leary and Martin Elias, who's obviously been with the Dallas Jackals team. So we'll see. I think the way that he played last season would merit him a chance at playing at the 10 position, especially when Miami starts seeing a little bit of success. And if he is that, I think he finishes off as the fifth best fly
Yeah,
half
only
this
thing that
season.
scares me is Martin Elias is coming off a good back half of the season last year for the Dallas Jackals. But nonetheless, I like the pick. I like Videla. Great pick. Number four for me, Rye, Tim Swiel, new guy coming into Chicago.
Hmm.
This is exactly what Chicago needed, right? We talk about the whole Billy Meeks experiment. We talk about kind of the direction that they went at 10. They ended up with Luke Carty being at 10. And they upgrade from Luke Carty to a guy who has over, 100 professional caps across multiple leagues. A guy who's just coming off playing for the Saracens, has played for Edinburgh, has played for the Stormers, the Newcastle Falcons, the Harlequins, all of these, the Western Province, all of these teams across kind of South Africa and Europe. Um, yeah, he's going to bring in class. And I think a lot of kind of characteristics remind me of when Joel Hodgson came in. I think he's going to be a guy that is going to be kind of like very consistent off the tee and continue to get you points off the tee. Whether he'll get a lot of meters gained, we'll find out. But to me, I think he brings in class to a quality side like the Chicago Hounds, and that's going to mean that he's going to have the opportunity to put up a lot of points.
For it was so hard to leave, and this I guess is a little bit of a spoiler. It was so hard to leave Tim Swiel off my list. He was like it was between Tim Swiel and Santiago Videla to kind of round out my top five. I just went with the guy that I've seen play in this league. But yeah, you're spot on. I think Tim Swiel, Joel, like yes, a Joel Hodgson coming into this league. That's exactly what it's going to be. And to kind of answer the question that we usually answer at the end, he's going to be the scariest guy that I left off my list that I think has potential to finish off as one of the best fly halves in the league. All right, moving on to number four for me. I got Cliven Laubser.
Very nice.
I talked about finishing off as a Santiago Videla finishing off as the third best fly half on a points per game basis. Well, the guy ahead of him, Cliven Laubser, he started in just not, I believe, 10 matches last season and scored 119 fantasy points. Oscar Collar was obviously the go-to guy there in Carolina for quite some time, who was a point producing machine. But then he moved on. Cliven Laubser stepped in, and Cliven Laubser kind of picked it up where he went off. I had him in my fantasy league last year. It was fun having him. It was fun watching him play. He was money from the tee. He was able to score tries. I mean, you look at some of these point totals. I mean, 26 and a half fantasy points in round 12. Incredible. Finishing off the year in rounds 15, 16, 17. 26, 15.3, 14.8. Don't be scared that he plays for the Anthem. Cliven Laubser is going to still get it done for you
Yeah,
fantasy wise.
and we shouldn't be scared. Like the Anthem is going to be a quality side. We've seen them compete with the best of the teams, and they're going to continue to compete because their team got better and they've got a lot of young talent with a lot of young energy. And we've heard that firsthand from a lot of the players. Yeah, I think Cliven Lobster is going to be probably more of a staple 10. I think the one thing I'm a bit worried about is the fact he's not going to get those minutes at 15 as much. So we'll see how
Hmm.
that pans out. But I do like that pick a lot. I think we're kind of in agreement here, right? At number three, Joel Hodgson.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I mean, there's not much else to say. It confirms we knew that he was gonna. We assumed that he was coming back. The skipper for Utah. He's a guy that plays a lot of minutes for Utah. Is the backbone of that offense for Utah as well. And a guy that's not necessarily going to get you the meters gain, not necessarily going to put up amazing tackle numbers, but a guy who's going to be consistently great off the tee. And all of that is going to just gives him the consistency and gives him a great floor. A guy who puts up double digit points can like all the time, pretty much. And you know that he's going to be the starter there.
Hmm.
Doesn't matter how well Utah is. They've been average for the past few years and he's continued to shine. So I like Joel Hodgson here at three.
Yeah, finished off as the fly half two last year, 199.5 fantasy points. I think him at three for us,
Well,
and
yeah, there's only
I
one
think
reason why he's not
we'll
in the top two.
right, and I think that to that point, as we move on to number two, is that I think him being at three is more of a factor of the two guys that are in front of him, rather than us thinking that he's taking a
Yep.
step back. Like Joel Hodgson is going to
Yep.
get you points. Like it's going to be electric this season. All right, coming in at number two, where we're also in agreement with Christian Lealifano. We're gonna see him tonight in the matchup
Yeah,
against
I'm
Fiji and
really
Drua.
excited.
Uh,
Yeah.
and this is gonna be awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome,
he's going to be
awesome,
great to
awesome to see.
watch. I mean, look, he's just a story. Like his story is incredible. The fact that this guy is, has played over like has 150 caps for the Brumbies, over 25 appearances for the Wallabies, like also played for Samoa with all the kind of the rules there. Goes back, plays for Moana Pacifica as well. The guy, in the middle of his career, you got to remember in the middle of his career, this guy gets leukemia, beats leukemia, comes back and plays. Just an incredible story to hear and just an incredible guy. Um, and I'm excited to see like he is world class. He is a guy that is going to be able to shine on a really successful or what we think is going to be a successful RFCLA team. And as long as that team's putting up points, Christian Lealifano is also going to have the opportunity to put up points here, whether he's doing it offensively with his feet, which he's done in the past and in his career, or if he's doing it off the boot by kicking the ball through the post. I think he's going to have a great season for RFCLA.
Like, how often is it that you get a guy that has scored over 1,000 points in
Yeah,
Super Rugby coming
I
to
mean,
MLR? I mean, the seventh player
963
in
of those are
Super
all
Rugby.
for the Brumbies. Like it's just
Like,
it's ridiculous. And the fact that we've got this type of class in the league is really a great sign. And makes
mhm.
me even more excited to watch this team play.
Absolutely. All right. Shifting on to number one, where we're also in agreement. I don't think we can dethrone this
No.
guy until he gets dethroned in a season. I can see a world where if the way that LA plays, is the way that we expect them to play. I think there's a world where Leofano can finally maybe supplant this guy, but until that happens, he's going to be my number
Yeah.
one. Jason Petros, New England Free Jacks, 210.6 fantasy points last season, finishes off as your fly half one. He's on a great team. He can kick the
Can't
ball.
tackle.
He may not know how to tackle. Yeah, exactly. Matthew said it on the show a whole bunch, but he has been as consistent as it comes, and it's exactly what you want from a fantasy MLR fly half. I don't think there's really much to be said. Jason
Yeah.
Petros
And
is a shoe in.
frankly, it is a toss up between these two, in my opinion. Yeah, it's really tough, but I feel really great about both of these picks. The other thing that I will say is like both of these guys don't really have a lot of depth behind them fighting for their position. And you're not going to not start Leilufano, and you're not going to not start Jason Potros. At this point, Potros is a superstar in this league. All right, some guys. I mean,
I,
sorry, go ahead. Right.
I'll just say first, I'll just say that I think, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I
You're
think
wrong.
Petros and Leolifano, Petros and Leolifano, 100% first round picks, right? Like they're off the board in that first round. 18 league,
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah.
I think they're
Potentially.
Hodgson might be on that cusp and maybe on the come around, but man, that's it's gonna be
Yeah.
fun
Um,
watching those two.
some honorable mentions, some quick honorable mentions. I've not got too many that you haven't talked about, Ryan. I've got Clive and
Hmm.
Lobster in there. I definitely agree with you. Santiago Videla, definitely agree with you. One guy that we haven't talked about, Eddie Fouché,
Hmm.
for the Seattle Seawolves. The only concern with him is the fact that they do bring in Rodney Iona.
Hmm.
And you kind of wonder how that is. But Eddie Fouché, just his time in South Africa, playing professional and professionally in South Africa, I mean, he looked great. The film that I watched on him, he is fantastic, incredible skill at the 10 position. If he takes a hold of that starting position, which I can definitely see a possibility, he's going to do very well and he can crack that fifth spot.
It's a weird situation, right? Like
Well,
it's a weird way. Like you have Fouché, you have Iona. I get it.
Iona
Iona has
has
played
shown
center
that, I mean,
before.
he's not going to play center, but he has shown in the past that he's lost his position. He has lost his position to the
Right.
likes of Reese Botha, simply just because he has these flashes of great games and these flashes of really awful play. Um, so it'll be interesting to see, and I'm looking forward to it.
The only other one, again, you mentioned Tim Sweel, you mentioned Jason Robertson, who I have again right on that cusp, like I mentioned. But Lincoln
Ah,
McClutchy would like to add. Obviously, kind of let people down last year when it came to his fly half performance. Finished off as the fly half 14, but he has a pretty big stranglehold. Makato is not around anymore, so we'll see what McClutchy does. Again, not high hopes for him, but again, there is a world where he is very, very productive this season. I'll also add AJ Alatimu. We just haven't
yeah.
seen him play a full season, and depending on what he does, because again, this is another guy who, when he was in his Seattle days, was one of the top fantasy scorers up
Yep.
there, and I want to mention him because there is a possibility in a world where he reaches back to that. All right, let's go on to our centers, Maddie.
The points.
Last year, well, this is where the points are. And again, for all those new fantasy MLR managers out there, the center position is almost like, I guess, the quarterback in fantasy football, or your workhorse running back, I should say. Just a guy that you can rely on will get you consistent points while also having that ceiling. And last year, the guys that did it for you most, Devon Rousseau finishes off as your center one. He played a lot of center last year. We'll talk about the expectation of his slot, where he slots in the Seattle lineup this year. But again, he has that eligibility. Finished off with 207.2 fantasy points last year. Wayne Vanderbank
Back of the year.
had one
Player of
of
the
the
year.
back of the year, one of the most surprising. I think we named him the steal of
Yep.
the year. Right, like no one thought. Everyone had chips in on Leroux Milan, and then the injury happened. We didn't think Vanderbank was going to come through, but he did. 200.3 fantasy points again. Only a handful of guys broke that 200 plus point mark, and he was one of them. Junior Goffa at number three at 162.9 fantasy points. Dan Creel, 150.5 at number four for Seattle. And then Jordan Jackson Hope, who we will not be seeing this season, who he announced because of injury, finished off at number five with 148.6 fantasy points. Let's get right into it, Maddie. Who do you got at number five?
Number 5, I got a newcomer here. We got the former All Black Sevens player, Isaac Tutamaki. Fun fact, I do have a picture with this guy at BC Place when he played in Canada Sevens, and I was also there yelling his name, asking for
You
a
find
picture.
every single chance to plug that.
Well, hey, it was a good time. Um, yeah, I mean, look, I have him. He's on a great NOLA side. He's in a great backline in a great position. And we saw just how successful Jordan Jackson Hope was with the likes of even with JP Duplessis in that lineup. I can see Isaac Tatamaki with his footwork, with his ability to run in open space, to be really good at 13. Coming off a season with the Pro G2 side in France, also playing for Southland in the MPC Bunnings Cup. I think that he has a really good chance to sign here on a great lineup.
Yeah, no, again, you have the picture with him, so I think
That's
just
true.
through that, you're more knowledgeable about what T Tamaki can bring. But again, I think there is a lot of optimism around this Nola Gold side that is going to be fun. Hard to leave him
Yep.
out, that's for sure. But for me at number five, I have Wayne Vanderbank. Again,
Oh,
some I think there's going to
it's
be
a tough
differing
one, right?
opinions here, right? It's some people are gonna be like, why isn't he higher on your list? Honestly, he was on the cusp. I had a whole bunch of time where Wayne Vanderbank was actually not on my list here,
Yes,
and you're probably thinking that's
that
crazy
is.
because he was your second highest scoring center last year with 200.3 fantasy points. It scares me that center back room or that center room with how many options that they have. Wayne Vanderbank had a perfect opportunity last season with the absence of Leroux Milan. I think Leroux Milan, again, you look back to 2023, there was a rotating room of centers there where they were all very productive. But again, from a fantasy standpoint, it hurts. I think Wayne Vanderbank is not going to necessarily reach that 200 point mark
Uh-oh.
again, but he's still going to be a very, very solid center
Uh-oh.
for you. There wasn't a way that I was going to leave him off the list. I just think he takes a step back because what he did last year was so special. And I think a lot of the factors are working against him. Again, a great fantasy option. I'm not knocking
Sounds like
Wayne
you are.
Vanderbank. I just think that it's going to help from a health standpoint for him, LaRue Milan, Ben Lesage, all of them, that they're going to have these options. I just don't think it's going to be Wayne Vanderbank alone that's going to be getting these points. It's going to be a little bit more spread out amongst many
Can
more
I
of
say
them.
something that will maybe make you feel like you made the wrong pick?
What?
So last year, end of the year, all three of them were healthy. Wayne Vanderbank still
Yes.
ran that center room for sure.
Yes.
They bring in Jack Reeves,
I
who's
okay.
coming from Gloucester, and he's listed
Hmm.
as a center. He played
Hmm.
wing for Gloucester. And you look at that back three
Okay.
room and you see where their gaps are on the wing. So I think it's going to be the same rotation between the three, which is why I got him ranked a little higher here.
But there is a difference between a LaRue Milan that is coming off of a horrific injury that he has sustained and entering halfway through the season than having a full off season, training with the team, going through all that. Like LaRue Milan did not
Yeah,
look like LaRue Milan towards the tail end of the year. He scored the beautiful try in the MLR Shield match, which is a glimpse of what we can maybe expect from him. But yeah, no, I mean, I could be completely proven wrong here. Wayne Vanderbank, what he did last year, but there was also a world where Wayne Vanderbank was in the lineup in 2023, and it was Leroy Milan's show, right?
true.
Again, we'll
But the
we'll
same
we'll
thing
we'll,
we
we'll
did
see
see
from
last year,
there,
Leroy
but
Milan was in the lineup and it was Wayne Vanderbank show.
mhm,
So we'll see.
yeah, so we'll see,
Um,
we'll see. All right, moving to number four.
Number four, who do I got here? I got Dan Creel. Tough to leave him out of a top five. I'm definitely not going to
Hmm.
do it. He is a guy that is, when we talk about last year, we talk about a guy who we just bring up every week. As yep, this guy was one of the top point scorers for Seattle. Yep, this guy's got the ball. I think the fact that him and Mika Kruse are now together, I think it provides a lot more space for the two of them. Just with the
Hmm.
quality player that Mika Kruse is as well. Um, and yeah, I think this backline's going to continue to do what they did last year, and Dan Krill's going to be a huge part of it. Um, yeah, it's not much else to say about him.
For me at number four, I have Junior Goffa,
Nice.
162.9 fantasy points, a former rookie of the year. Finished off as our third best center last year for Anthem Rugby Carolina. It is so fun to watch
Mhm.
this guy. It is
The
so
bowling
fun
ball.
to watch this guy play. And the high speed offense that the Anthem played last season really benefited him. I think he's still growing. I think he's still maturing. I think he's still getting better each and every day. I'm excited to see what his ceiling is this year, which is why I have him at number four.
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, and I've got him at number three, so I'm not going to add too much. But yeah, he's going to be a staple of this Anthem offense. And you think
Hmm.
about the fact that he's gotten better, or the team's gotten better, is going to give him even more opportunities to score tries, to break the gain line, to get a lot of meters gained. And remember, he's not just a meters gain guy; he's a huge tackle guy, and he will get his head in there. Junior Goffa, yeah, this one's a pretty easy number three for me.
And then I guess quickly moving on to my number three, I got Thomas Kubia
Nice.
here at number three. I'm excited to see what this guy can do in a full season. In just the 9 matches he played last year, he had the most points per game, just
Stud.
behind Vanderbank and Tian Lutz. 91.6 fantasy points, finishes off as the center 20 and basically half the games played. And I remember when we were watching him kind of emerge like that, like he was fun to watch. And you go down the list of the matches that he had, like 13.1, 16.1,
Yep.
15.2, like all double digit fantasy performances, all above 13 points. Like Kubia, if he obviously you extrapolate that out, like he'll be a great center option
Yeah,
for you.
100%. Yeah, I like that pick a lot. I like that little sleeper pick. He's one of my honorable mentions, but I do like you throwing him in that top five. I'm not going to say too much here at number two, Rye. Wayne Vanderbank, again, for the reasons that I stated before, I think he's going to continue to
Mhm.
have opportunity. He's going to carry off the momentum from last year. They're going to continue to trust him with the ball in hand. And yeah, I don't think, I think just because one center does well does not mean the other can't shine as well.
And then I have Dan Creel, who you mentioned earlier at my number two spot. The sole reason I have Dan Creel here, he finishes off as the center four. I think he can go upwards, the upwards trend from here. We've seen what Creel was able to do. I think this was a down year for him based on
Yep.
what he did in 2023. And again, even then, we were mentioning him every single week. He's at my number two spot because of consistency. He may not get you those flashy Wayne Vanderbank or Junior Goffa or Kubia, 30-point games, but Dan Creel, count on him getting you 12 to
That's
13
for sure.
points every single week while throwing in a couple big matches here and there. Creel's as stable as it gets when it comes to consistency and points at that center position.
100%.
We're in agreement at number one, Maddie.
Billy Meeks, I think that we're gonna see a vintage Billy Meeks. And when I say vintage, I just mean like LA Adam Gilchrist, Giltinis these days. Like I think this RFC LA offense is gonna run through him. I think he's gonna be the guy that takes the ball forward and opens it up for the rest of the team. And the more time he gets ball in hand, we know that just it's going to give him the opportunity to break the line, and he's going to be one of the biggest meter eaters that Jam Delay is going to be posting about this year. And that's
Yeah.
that's his bread and butter, and I think we're going to see a lot of that.
Yeah, not much to add there. Finished off as a center eight. Obviously, a very disappointing season with Chicago. Fly half experiment did not work. Chicago was just not meshing well last year. They obviously go on a run towards the tail end of the year, but just quite
Yep.
disappointing from the Chicago end of things. He has his coffee shop out west. He has succeeded out west. Again, you mentioned it with the Giltinis. He was electric. We had him in fantasy circles when we were kind of following along with that when the Giltinis were around. And man, Billy Meeks was a buzzsaw, to use your
He's
guys'
got
term, when it came to point
huge
scoring, and he can
lips,
do that with he
like
can do
shark
that with
tails.
RFC. RFC RFC LA, the way
Yeah,
that they're
Lola,
looking this year.
Lola from Shark Tales.
Couple Stop it. Stop it.
Look it
Um,
up if you don't know.
let's talk about some honorable mentions here. You mentioned Isaac Titamaki. I want to mention Leroy Milan because there is a
Yep.
world where he goes back into form there.
Dion
I'll
Lutz.
mention also Tion Lutz, big one. Again, the only other guy that was above Thomas Kubia was Tian Lutz when it came to points per game last season. Again, can he stay in that lineup? There's obviously Ethan Grace in there. And who am I also missing? There's another Legion guy that's that's there. Tavit Lopetti
Yep.
now there
Yeah,
with
it'll be interesting for sure.
with San Diego. We'll see. Nikolai Foliaki. Again, I think Nola's going to be electric there. He has the experience and the pedigree. We'll see maybe if he's a guy that kind of
Coming
contributes.
off the
Obviously,
bench.
JP Duplessis in that mix coming off the bench. We'll see there. Ollie Devoto
Yeah.
is a guy too that I wanted to throw in there. And then based off of opportunity and experience, D'Angelo Leuila. I just want to mention there, Utah. Obviously, you have Lasike there, but Leuila has a lot of experience. we'll see if his athleticism alone opportunity might be there for him because Lasike is not playing the full 16, 17 matches. So Leilua might come in there and score some
Yeah, and
points
the
for
only
you.
guy that you missed there, I think, is Jack Reeves. I think this guy is going to be a player that's going to switch between the back three and the centers. It'll be really interesting to see how he goes. He's coming from Gloucester. He's U.S. eligible. He's a young guy, and it's great to see him back in the MLR. So I'm looking forward to seeing Jack Reeves shine.
All right, let's go into the last back position here, Maddie. It's almost our boomer bust position. The guys that are going to score you a
Yep.
whole bunch of points in a week, but also could goose egg you and make you feel pretty bad. But here is our best guess at the top five of those boomer bust guys. Last year in 2025, this is where we kind of mentioned it. There's a lot of change here when it comes to the
Hmm.
top back three players. We got Michael Manson, who finished off at number one, no longer in the league, but he was electric. 242.1 fantasy points last season for Utah. Incredible. Matt, I will be hesitant to say, but you did call his success last year. Taranga Tira Waitokia, we mentioned it at the start of the show when talking about Anthem Rugby Carolina's squad. He is not on that roster this season. He was the second best back three player, 218.6 fantasy points. Someone else is going to have to fill that void. Devon Rousseau, we mentioned him earlier, 207.2. He is also center eligible, but also back three eligible. We expect and we'll get into it here that he is probably going to be playing more of his time here at the back three position. Taniela Filimone, Nola Gold, also not back with Nola, who, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong,
I
signed
believe he's with the
a
Chiefs
Super Rugby contract.
or Moana
Super Rugby
Pacifica,
contract,
one of the two.
187.5 fantasy points there last season. And then Reese McDonald, New England Free Jacks last season, now with LA, 184.8. Obviously, suffered that
And is
injury, will not be
until
returning
March.
until mid-season, until March this year. So, again, 4 out of the 5 guys are going to be replaced. And these are the guys that we think are going to do it. Start with number 5, Maddie.
I got Davey Kutzer here. Look, last year we had him. We talked about it. He has that fly half back three eligibility. I think he's going to play majority at the back three position at 15. He'll probably split time with Drew Wild, but I think he's going to play most of his time at back three. Um, yeah, and he was absolutely electric every time he played 15. I don't see him necessarily being at the top, right? I think he's going to lose out some points from the kicks for goal. And I can see him kind of sitting at that fifth position on a team that doesn't necessarily use the ball in an expansive way, doesn't necessarily get that ball out. But he is a great counterattacker, that's for sure.
Yeah, I have him at number 5 as well. Again, counterattacker, guy that is just athletic. His athletic prowess is the reason why I have
Yeah.
him on this list. Just some of the things he was able to do on the pitch was just incredible. And again, I think the factors that bring him down to 5 are the things you mentioned there. Obviously, AJ Alatimu is going to be kicking as well, taking some of that. I will say some of the thing that is baked into his draft capital that people may want to consider. I had Davy Kutzer last year, obviously to start the season, expecting that he was going to be the fly half until AJ Alatimu came to the team. If he just plays a fly half game here and there, having him as eligible at both fly half and back three is very nice, especially in those bye weeks
Yeah.
when you don't have a kicker and maybe you could just throw Kutzer in there and be like, hey, he's gonna maybe kick points. It is very nice. But again, not something, at least from a point standpoint, that necessarily will get him into the upper echelon of back three players, but still one that may complement your team very well. At number 4, Maddie, who do you got?
I'm going on a little bit of a Nola tear here, but Villa Moni Koroi, new guy coming in from New Zealand, played a bunch of competitions for the All Black Sevens. You can see kind of a trend here for Nola, but also 15's experience with the Highlanders and Otago in the MPC Bunnings Cup. This guy is a star coming out of New Zealand. I mean, this guy is a genuine star coming out of New Zealand. And this guy has great footwork. I think he's going to absolutely shine. I'm really looking forward to seeing the way that he fits in this lineup and seeing the way that I think, is going to score a lot of tries here. I'm hoping that he plays. And I mean, I think he played a little bit at fullback. I could be wrong. But yeah, I'm hoping that he plays fullback because that's really why I got him here.
Gotcha. And then me at number 4. You're starting to go back on that Nola tear, huh? You're hopping right back
Hey,
on
I'm
that
just picking
Nola
their players.
train.
I'm just playing it as I see it, you know?
For number four for me, I got, and no bias here, I promise. This is strictly um what I think LA
Okay.
is going to do here. But friend of the show, Andrew Coe at number four. Did you remember that he got suspended last year for pretty
Got
absurd
suspended
reasons?
for absolutely nothing.
And he still scored 157.8 fantasy points and finished off as the eighth best back three player. I believe he was what, suspended for 3 matches, was it? I think.
I don't
Was it
know. It's
three? Two or
stupid.
three? Either way, he's on a more electric LA team. We've seen what he can do with the New York Ironworkers before that. Did it still last year, despite the missed matches there, and he comes back this season, with some vengeance and with hopefully a full rack of matches on his docket here coming up here in 2025. I think Andrew Coe is not necessarily the flashy play here when you pick him at back three because he's been in the league for so long and he's been a staple of the league, but I think you're going to be very happy when you do have him
Great
again.
pick.
Ask Vandy. He was the guy that passed on him in drafts last year. He said he wasn't going to, and he regrets it every single day. Andrew Coe for me,
Yeah,
number
continuing
four.
my Nola tear here. Ed Fido. Tough not to pick this guy. I know that he had a down year. I know that he had a down year, and people were picking him first, and it hurt. It hurt. He had a down year 2 years ago, but we saw the return of Ed Fido at the end of the season last year. We saw that power. We saw that speed. I think he is going to only get more opportunity to show that off this season with the backline that he's working with. So I think he's going to take another big step up. This is very reminiscent of the way that New York backline looked at the
Mhm.
time, and I think he's going to get a lot of similar opportunity.
For me, it's just I'm concerned. I'm concerned about the injuries. Hasn't played a full season in a
Yeah.
long time, and I'm not too sure
Hey,
whether
but
or
he
not.
showed his
But I will.
off-season YouTube vids. He was gearing up. He looked like he was looking
There you
good.
go. I mean, when Eddie Fido's on, Ed Fido's on, right? I don't think there's a question when he's on the pitch that he is going to score you points. It's just, how reliable is he going to be there for you throughout the season? If he does play full 16 match season, yeah. He's going to be the guy that I'm most scared that I left off this list. But I do have a NOLA guy, a gold guy that I'll mention on my list now. Xavier Mignot,
Yeah.
coming over from overseas in France. I think he's a guy that has experience, has played with some top tier programs across the world. Lyon is one of them. Won the Challenge Cup with them in 22. Has a cap with France, which is I think that's something that is very should be looked at quite highly. Brings a lot of experience. I think you can throw in for me really any of these NOLA Gold guys.
Yeah.
I would
It's,
probably put Xavier and then who you mentioned there with Villamoni Karoy, and then maybe Ed Vito again if he has a healthy
yeah.
season.
I
But
think to me, I think
we'll see.
Karoy has the most upside just because he's going to play fullback. It's going to be a Xavier Mignot and Ed Fido, just depending on who kind of gets the opportunity. But Croy is going to be absolutely electric. I'm looking forward to seeing him in the counterattack. Ryan at number two, I had to go him. I had to go Logan Isaacs. I mean,
Mhm.
I think he's also going to be starting at 15 for this RFCLA side. And I love the way he plays. I love how hard he runs the ball. I love just the way that he plays. When he started for Dallas before that injury, he was just absolutely electric to watch, especially at 15. And I just see him continuing that with an even better side than that Dallas side and a very similar
Yeah,
offense.
I have him at number two as well. I cannot wait to
And
watch
hey,
Logan Isaacs play
there's
this
a
season.
big chance that Rory Van Voot starts playing at 15. This is what I am watching later. I am very concerned about this one simply because Rory Van Voot is also class and can very easily take that starting or at least make it very difficult for Rogan Isaacs to hold on to that week in, week out.
It is true, but if he sees the field, I mean, if you saw it last
Yeah.
year, like it was incredible until he had that knee injury in round 11. He was just on an
Yeah.
absolute tear for the
And can
Jackals,
sometimes kick.
and can sometimes
Uh,
kick, which is always a nice
Speaking
thing.
of extremely hard runners, Ryan, and extremely big bodies, we got to talk about at
Yeah.
number one, a guy who we've also aligned on, Devon Rousseau. When he plays 15, he is an absolute menace. Counterattack. with the ball in hand, everything. Seattle gives him the opportunity. He takes the opportunity and he does a lot with it. Every time he has the ball in hand, you think something special is going to happen. I don't think you need to be concerned. I think it's actually a plus of the fact that they have Duncan Matthews because I think that gives Devon Rousseau potential opportunity to play at 13, giving him even more, you know, opportunity with the ball in hand. So I really like Devon Rousseau at 1. I feel really good about this one.
Yeah, 207.2 points last year. Finishes off as the back 3-3, like we mentioned. And I think again, the sentiment that Maddie and I are on here is that I think he's going to be starting a majority of his matches at the
Yep.
fullback position. He obviously saw some time at center last year, but I think Devon Rousseau is going to really take a stranglehold of
Yep.
that. Obviously, Duncan Matthews is still there. We'll see how that kind of plays into the
That's fine.
fold. But again, Devon Rousseau is not coming out of that lineup.
Although
Whether or not he's starting at back three or at center, I think he's going to be a
Duncan
fine
Matthews is
play.
one of the smallest bomb diffusers I've ever seen.
It's true. You're
Yeah.
huge on him. Let's go, Matt, quickly here through after now that we've gone through the scrum halves, fly halves, centers, and back threes. Who are your top five overall backs?
Yeah. So I got Devon Rousseau, I got Billy Meeks, Jason Potros, Wayne Vanderbank, and then Vogan Isaacs rounding that out at number 5.
All right. For me, I got Devon Rousseau, Vogan Isaacs, Billy Meeks, Dan Creel, Jason Putros, and Xavier McNote at five. I guess what we wanted to touch on, though, too, is some sleeper names here in the back three positions.
Yeah, I mean the only ones that I got really that we haven't already touched on is Jordan Trainer. He's gonna get opportunity in Utah. He's
Okay.
coming back to the MLR, being with NOLA, going to Moana Pacifica, coming back to the MLR. I think he's gonna have a lot of opportunity with that Utah side, very similar to Caleb McInerney, I think. And we really can't forget Jade Steitling. Like we can't forget the fact that this guy is an absolute buzzsaw on the wing for the Seattle Seawolves and just
Yeah.
scores tries and just knows how to score tries. So can't forget him.
Honorable mentions I want to mention. Maybe I don't think these guys will be finishing in the top five, but something to consider maybe later in your picks. Nate Oxberger, we've seen him do this before in
Eh.
2023. Chicago looks to be taking a step up. There is a chance in a world where maybe Nate Oxford becomes a little bit more efficient again. Joe Mono, kind of the same
Mm.
sentiment again. As a guy that has been electric in the MLR. Utah is maybe not looking the best heading into this year, but either way, you pair that up, and you have Joe Mono back there. It could happen. I will say a sleeper pick. He's not going to finish in the top five, but he may put top five numbers when he does return. You can't rule out Reese McDonald when he comes back from injury.
Another
I think there'll
hey,
be a lot of fun
as
stuff.
another
Another
thing
fullback.
for Vogan Isaacs to be worried about.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good strategy might be to just grab them
Yeah, if you
all,
can.
grab them all. All right, lastly here, Maddie, to round out our top five picks that we've been making over the course of the past two episodes. Let's go through who we think our top five overall players in fantasy MLR are going to be. You and I are in agreement at number one. We both think Devon Rousseau, right, is our number one pick to finish off the year. Um, Maybe we'll see him go 1.1 this
Yep.
season here in a lot of drafts because because of this segment, or maybe not. Second for me though, Semi Kunatani
Jeez.
is going in at number two. He finished off as the third best player this past season, only behind Michael Manson and uh, uh, Tarangatira Waitokia. So Semi Kunatani coming in at two. Maddie, who do you have at
I
two?
got Billy Meeks. I mean, it's basically just following my backs top 5 all the way until number 5 where I put Semi Kunatani.
All right. Well, I got Vogan Isaacs then to follow at three, Billy Meeks at four, Putros at five. So then for you, Putros, Wayne Vanderbank, then Semi Kunatani. All right. That was fun,
It
Matty.
was a good time.
Breaking down all those players. We'll see how accurate we
Not
are
at
once we
all.
start. But again,
Who cares about?
the studies start now. We got some preseason rugby to
Yep.
watch, which is going to be a whole lot of fun. We just got one more thing to get to before we
Screw the
wrap up the show.
defense.
TFR Betting Challenge.
Oh, nice. Thank goodness we're not doing the defense.
I know,
Who
Vandy.
cares about the
I
defense?
know. Who cares about the defenses? We probably
No,
should have
screw
touched on
'em.
it.
No,
Give
no,
it
no,
quickly.
screw
I
them. We're
got.
not doing it. You already
Give it
played the
quickly.
intro music. We got to do Dambles. Ryan, there are Six Nations coming up.
There are. That's why I wanted to bring it up. We got Six Nations coming up. Of course, MLR is coming up around the corner. The TFR
This thing's going
Betting
to start
Challenge,
ramping up
Devon's
here.
Degenerate. Dambles is coming back here, brought to you by Betstamp. We still have the partnership with them. If you want some good betting deals in area and the location that you are at, check out the link down below. It's a really, really nice website. Gives you and curates all the sports books that are available in your area. It is the link that we use to get signed up for our sports books. It's been a lot of fun, and it's what you need when you're dabbling in different MLR odds here across sports books in your area, especially when MLR comes back. But we got Six Nations to start
Not
off
this
with.
weekend, but
When Vandy
next.
comes
So it's
back,
perfect timing.
when Vandy comes back, just wanted to mention it. Vandy and I will be revamping that challenge, and we'll be rolling that right into the MLR season. And it should be fun. We don't need to mention that he kicked my butt in the
Oh, we
off
do.
season Degenerates Dambles TFR betting challenge. All right, let's wrap up the show, Matt. I'm gonna say it quickly: New England, Houston, Chicago, Seattle, Los Angeles.
Who cares?
That's
Who
that's my
cares? Flip a
defense. What's
coin and
yours?
just pick one.
All right. Flip a coin and pick one. That's what he says. Maddie, anything else that you have to say to the
No,
people?
let's just get ready for a great season. I think Ryan, we got mock drafts coming up next week.
That is right. Mock drafts coming up here in episode
wanna tune in.
139, coming back next week. That one is one of our favorite episodes of the year. We'll see whether or not we put our money where our mouth is when it comes to these rankings. That's where it will really show. Maddie, myself, and Vandy go on a 3-way head-to-head mock draft. No, don't go there. Don't go there.
Okay. But yeah,
All
hey,
right.
you're going to want to tune in. We got drafts coming up. You're going to want to sign up for the leagues. Once the drafts start coming in, you're going to want to know what we think about who you should be picking, who's going to go where, and how these rankings play into it. But yeah, until then, right, we're just going to I'm going to get back into the film room, get studying. This episode went a little long, so this is a little bit outside. Like, it's taken a little bit out of my film study, but that's okay, right? I'll do it for the people.
Doing it for the people. You're just a man of the people. Man of the people. That's what makes you opposite of the Supreme Commissioner.
dictator.
All right. For Matt Yee, for Devin Vandy Vanderpool, I'm Ryan Yee, and we'll see you next week on another episode of the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
Commander Commissioner.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.